Deep in the heart of the desert, a buried secret from an ancient royal family threatens to tear the present apart. When an archaeologist goes missing, a legendary detective is called in to unravel a conspiracy that goes beyond time itself. But as the truth unravels, one question remains: who will survive the curse of the past? Stay tuned, because the truth is more dangerous than you could ever imagine. The scorching sun of Mesopotamia beats down relentlessly as Hercule Poirot's feet touch the earth of this ancient land. The scent of dust and mystery lingers in the air. The great sands of the desert stretch out endlessly before him, hiding secrets older than time itself. For centuries, the region has captivated the imaginations of explorers, archaeologists, and historians, but this time, it's different. Poirot has not come here out of mere curiosity or adventure. He has been invited by an old friend, Dr. Abdul Karim, an archaeologist of renown, who promises to share the unspoken truths of a royal family lost to the ravages of time. Poirot's eyes narrow as he steps off the transport plane, the heat greeting him like a physical blow. He is well-traveled, accustomed to the discomforts of distant lands, but Mesopotamia is unlike any place he's visited before. The ancient ruins whisper of forgotten rituals, buried betrayals, and long-lost civilizations. There is something undeniably powerful about this land, a haunting beauty that seems to demand reverence. And as he surveys the landscape, Poirot's instinct tells him that the secrets he is about to uncover here will not just be of the past, they will shake the very foundation of the present. Poirot's first impressions of the team and their surroundings. The team that Dr. Karim has assembled for this excavation is an eclectic group, each member drawn to the promise of discovery for their own reasons. But Poirot's sharp eyes see beyond the smiles and pleasantries. He notices the subtle shifts in posture, the brief, anxious glances exchanged between them, and the underlying tension that simmers just beneath the surface. As Poirot surveys the camp, set amidst the ruins of a once great city, the sense of unease is palpable. The air is dry and heavy, and the camp's makeshift tents seem like fragile bubbles against the vastness of the desert. The remnants of an ancient civilization lie scattered across the site, half-excavated statues, broken pottery, and the occasional glint of forgotten treasure buried in the sand. Yet, despite the team's excitement over their discoveries, Poirot senses that something is not quite right. The ruins seem to hum with a strange energy, and the camp feels more like an uneasy truce between the present and the past. Dr. Layla Abbas, the passionate archaeologist. Dr. Layla Abbas stands at the forefront of the excavation. She is a woman driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge, her eyes alight with a fierce determination to uncover the mysteries of the tombs beneath their feet. She speaks of the ancient royal family with reverence, as though she has lived with their ghosts for years. There is a brilliance about her intellectual fire that is hard to ignore. Yet, as Poirot watches her interact with the others, he notices a certain tension in her movements, an urgency to her actions. She is not merely studying history, she is living it, and Poirot wonders what personal motivations lie behind her obsession. Martha Duval, the mysterious widow. Martha Duval, the widow of a fellow archaeologist who perished under mysterious circumstances on a previous dig, carries an aura of sadness and intrigue. Duval's beauty is understated, but it is the quiet sorrow in her eyes that captures Poirot's attention. She speaks little, preferring to observe from the sidelines, but when she does speak, her words are measured and deliberate. There's a subtle, almost imperceptible air of mourning about her, as if the weight of her husband's death has followed her here. Poirot can't help but wonder whether her presence at this excavation is a personal pilgrimage, or whether her late husband's untold secrets still haunt her. Rupert Sinclair, the wealthy donor. Rupert Sinclair is a man of wealth, power, and influence, his face always adorned with a carefully crafted smile. He is the one who has financed this excavation, a gesture that he insists is rooted in a love for history. But Poirot isn't so easily fooled. Sinclair's eyes, while outwardly kind, reveal a colder, more calculating side. He is too polished, too perfect in his role as benefactor. There is something opportunistic about him, a man who uses his wealth to wield power over people and situations. Poirot wonders whether his interest in the ancient tomb is really about uncovering history, or if there is something far more personal at play. Ahmed Faris, the local guide. Ahmed Faris is a quiet, inscrutable man with the kind of deep, knowing eyes that seem to see straight through you. He is a local guide, born and raised in these harsh lands, and his connection to the desert runs deeper than his job. Faris doesn't speak much, but when he does, his voice carries the weight of ancient wisdom. The locals regard him with a mixture of respect and fear. Whispers of his family's old connection to the royal bloodline echo in hushed tones. Poirot is fascinated by Faris's calm demeanor, which contrasts sharply with the fevered excitement of the archaeologists. There is something enigmatic about him, something that hints at a far greater knowledge of the tomb than anyone else on the team. The discovery of the tomb and the disappearance. The team's excitement was palpable the moment they uncovered the ancient tomb buried deep beneath the desert sands. For days, the heat had been relentless, the work grueling, but now, all that hardship seemed worth it. As they carefully brushed away centuries of dust, a massive stone door emerged, covered in intricate carvings and hieroglyphs, seemingly untouched by time. The tomb was unlike anything they had expected, a royal burial site, an untouched relic of a forgotten dynasty. Poirot, though outwardly calm, felt the weight of the moment. The air around them seemed to thicken, charged with an ancient energy that couldn't be ignored. The team stood in awe as they gazed upon the door that had been sealed for thousands of years. Behind it lay a treasure trove of historic artifacts, royal relics, and perhaps answers to questions that had plagued historians for centuries. Yet, amid the excitement, Poirot's sharp mind noticed something unsettling. The archaeologists, usually careful and methodical, were now driven by something more, perhaps ambition, perhaps greed. The tomb had unleashed something in them that felt dangerous. The missing archaeologist. As the team celebrated, a dark shadow descended. The young archaeologist, Sarah, who had been working tirelessly at the site, was nowhere to be found. Her disappearance was sudden, and no one could explain it. The last anyone had heard from her was a cryptic message, a single, hurried call to Dr. Layla Abbas just hours before. Sarah had mentioned something about a strange artifact she had found in a hidden chamber, one that seemed to pulse with an unknown energy. She had also referenced symbols she couldn't quite understand, but which seemed to have some connection to the royal family buried within the tomb. Sarah's sudden absence sent ripples of fear through the group. The normally confident Dr. Abbas was visibly shaken, her obsession with the excavation now replaced with concern for her colleague. Rupert Sinclair, though still outwardly composed, couldn't hide the nervous energy in his eyes. The only one who remained unshaken was Ahmed Faris, the local guide, who seemed to know far more about the desert and its secrets than anyone else. But even he was oddly quiet now, his gaze distant, as though he too had sensed something sinister. The search and the strange symbol. The team split up to search for Sarah, combing the camp and the surrounding desert with growing desperation. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just an eerie emptiness. The night sky was starless, the desert winds howling like the voices of the past, and still no trace of Sarah. Hours passed, and Poirot found himself drawn back to the tomb. There was something about the place that gnawed at him, something that seemed to pull at his very soul. It wasn't just the missing archaeologist, it was the tomb itself, and the strange feeling it evoked. As the team gathered once more around the tomb's entrance, Poirot's keen eye caught something unusual, a symbol carved into the stone near the base of the door, barely visible in the fading light. The symbol was unmistakable. It matched exactly the one Sarah had described in her last call, the one she had found on the artifact. A symbol of a forgotten royal family, but there was something else in it, something that seemed alive, almost sentient. The lines of the symbol seemed to twist and shift, as though they were not etched in stone, but rather part of the very essence of the tomb itself. Poirot bent down, examining the symbol closely, his mind working rapidly. "This," he murmured, "is no mere design. It is a warning." As the team crowded around him, the winds suddenly shifted. The air grew colder, and a strange, unnatural silence settled over the desert. Then, from the distance, they heard its voice, soft at first, then growing louder, as if carried by the very winds themselves. It was a voice unlike any other, ancient and full of foreboding, and it seemed to come from all around them. The words echoed through the night, sending chills down their spines. "It has begun." The voice faded as quickly as it had come, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. The team stood frozen, the air thick with an overwhelming sense of dread. What had they unearthed? What had Sarah discovered? The sense of unease was now palpable. Something far darker than they could have ever anticipated had been set into motion. Cliffhanger. The team stood in stunned silence, their eyes scanning the desert for any sign of what had just occurred. Was it the wind, a trick of their minds? Or had the tomb truly awakened, its secrets too dangerous to be disturbed? Poirot's gaze remained fixed on the symbol, his brow furrowed in deep thought. "This, my friends," he said slowly, his voice low and deliberate, "is no accident. Someone, or something, is playing a game with us." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, just slightly, but enough to send a shiver through their bones. The air seemed to hum, and the tomb loomed ahead, more foreboding than ever. In the distance, a faint glow could be seen on the horizontal light that shouldn't be there, flickering like a flame on the edge of the desert. Poirot turned to face the group. "We must proceed carefully, for we are no longer in control of what is happening here." The ground trembled again, and then, with a sudden gust of wind, the strange symbol on the tomb's door began to glow, its lines shimmering with an unnatural light. The investigation begins. The oppressive desert heat had not relented since Sarah's disappearance. With every passing hour, the investigation into her vanishing grew more complex, and Hercule Poirot, ever the meticulous detective, understood the depth of the enigma before him. The disappearance of Sarah had shaken the excavation team to their core, but Poirot knew that in order to find answers, he would have to sift through the very people he stood alongside. Each of them was a potential suspect, each harboring their own secrets. The team had been small, intimate, but in these close quarters, tensions had slowly been building beneath the surface. What had initially been an exhilarating venture into the heart of ancient Mesopotamia now felt like a volatile powder keg, ready to explode at any moment. Sarah's discovery, the mysterious artifacts she had uncovered, and the cryptic symbols carved into the walls of the tomb were all more than just trivial oddities. They were the keys to a history long buried and forgotten, a history that, for reasons unknown, someone wanted to keep buried. Poirot's piercing eyes had already taken in every detail. Nothing escaped him, not the sudden glances, the tremor in a hand, the fidgeting of a foot. Every tiny reaction told him something. He wasn't looking for guilt per se. No, he was looking for truths wrapped in lies, for the inconsistencies in their stories, for that slight moment when someone's composure slipped, revealing a hidden side. His first move was to call upon Dr. Layla Abbas, the passionate archaeologist and leader of the excavation. She had invited Poirot here, after all, and was determined to finish the dig, despite the mounting fears. However, it was clear from the beginning that Dr. Abbas was not the composed, unshakable figure she appeared to be. When Poirot asked about Sarah's last moments on the site, Dr. Abbas's response was strained, her words clipped. She spoke of the young archaeologist as though she were just another team member, but Poirot could sense an undercurrent of guilt in her voice, something that did not sit right. "I told her to stay away from the deeper chambers," Dr. Abbas explained, her fingers nervously twisting a piece of paper. "There are areas of the tomb that are unstable. I never thought she'd venture there on her own." She paused, her lips tightening. She was excited. Too excited, perhaps. Poirot knew that tone all too well. It was the tone of someone attempting to mask deeper emotions. Was she shielding herself from responsibility? Or was there something more sinister at play? Had Sarah uncovered something that Dr. Abbas, with all her knowledge, had failed to comprehend herself? Poirot didn't press her further at that moment. Instead, he moved on to the other key members of the team, starting with Rupert Sinclair, the wealthy donor whose finances had made the excavation possible. Sinclair, in contrast to Dr. Abbas, appeared cool and collected, wearing his wealth like a finely tailored suit. He had the air of a man who was always in control, but Poirot suspected there was more to him than met the eye. When questioned, Sinclair was quick to distance himself from any involvement in Sarah's disappearance. His words flowed easily, almost too easily. "I had nothing to do with it. I've been in my tent going over financial reports. I had no idea she was missing until the others began to search." But Poirot was sharp. There was something in Sinclair's voice, an edge, a hesitation just before he spoke, like someone trying to make sure their lies fit together perfectly. The slick businessman had perfected the art of playing the benefactor, the man who paid for everyone's research but stayed above the fray. Yet, Poirot had no doubt that Sinclair was hiding something. The fact that Sinclair had the most to gain from the discovery of the tomb, that this excavation could be the key to a significant historical find, suggested that the stakes were higher for him than anyone else. Poirot's mind raced as he turned over the facts. Sinclair had money, power, and influence. What if he stood to lose something more? Perhaps there was more to the artifact Sarah had found than Sinclair wanted the others to know. Could it be that Sinclair's wealth had drawn him into a web of greed, making him desperate enough to cover up the truth? Poirot's suspicions grew deeper with the next person he interviewed, Ahmed Faris, the local guide. Faris had been with the team since the start of the dig, and while he was always quiet, his knowledge of the region and its secrets was unparalleled. Yet, as Poirot observed him closely, he noticed something unsettling about the man's behavior. Faris's silence was not merely one of reserve, it was calculated. His eyes darted nervously whenever Poirot asked about the desert's history or the secrets of the tomb. "You know the desert well, Mr. Faris," Poirot remarked, his voice gentle but probing. "What can you tell me about the symbols we found at the tomb's entrance?" Faris shifted uncomfortably. "The desert has many secrets, monsieur. Some should remain buried. Not all history is meant to be uncovered. It is a dangerous thing to disturb the past." Poirot's gaze never wavered. "But you've seen these symbols before, haven't you? The ones that match the artifact Sarah found." Faris's lips tightened as though he were holding back a flood of words. "I do not understand these things. They are from an ancient time, a time that does not concern us." But Poirot was unconvinced. Faris knew more than he was letting on, much more. The fear in his eyes was telling. The desert, after all, was not just his home. He had lived in its shadow for a lifetime, and he understood the weight of its history. Had he known something about the tomb? Was there a connection between Faris and the royal family's lost history that he was unwilling to share? The final interview would prove to be the most revealing, though. Sarah had been working closely with a set of ancient documents, detailed scrolls that had been uncovered within the tomb's inner chambers. Documents that spoke of a royal family whose very existence had been erased from history. These scrolls, once deciphered, had the potential to rewrite everything known about the region's past. Sarah had believed that these texts were more than just historical. They were pieces of a puzzle that pointed to a long-buried secret. Poirot's investigations into these documents revealed something chilling. The royal family Sarah had been studying had connections to both ancient myth and a lost civilization. What had Sarah discovered that made her so desperate to understand these texts? And more importantly, what had she found that someone on the team wanted to keep hidden? As Poirot read through Sarah's notes, it became clear that the missing archaeologist had uncovered not just history, but something far more dangerous, secrets that threatened to expose a network of power that had been operating in the shadows for centuries. These secrets, if exposed, would destroy reputations, topple empires, and unearth a conspiracy that would alter the entire landscape of the region. Yet, despite these revelations, Poirot's mind lingered on one question. Why had Sarah gone missing? What had she discovered in those final hours that had caused her to disappear without a trace? There was something hauntingly elusive about the events surrounding her vanishing, something that hinted at a much darker force at work. And just as Poirot pieced together the puzzle, the desert itself seemed to answer back. In the stillness of the night, as he stared at the ancient symbols carved into the tomb's walls, a faint sound echoed through the camp, a whisper on the wind, too faint to be real, but too clear to be ignored. "They know." It was a voice that seemed to come from all around them, a voice that sent shivers down Poirot's spine. He was not sure who had spoken it, but the message was clear. Someone knew exactly what Sarah had uncovered, and that someone was willing to go to any lengths to keep it buried. The excavation site was quickly becoming a place of chaos rather than discovery. As Hercule Poirot observed the mounting tensions between the team members, it became clear that what was happening inside the tomb was nothing compared to the drama unfolding outside of it. Dr. Lila Abbas, who had once been a confident and passionate leader, now found herself constantly at odds with Rupert Sinclair. Their once cordial relationship had become a bitter battlefield. The wealthy benefactor, with his deep pockets and powerful influence, had grown increasingly impatient with the progress of the dig. He berated Dr. Abbas at every turn, accusing her of mismanaging the excavation. Her sharp retorts and defensive posture did little to mask the growing animosity between them. The conflict was more than just professional. There were deeper layers at play. Sinclair had once been a silent partner, a backer who'd funded the dig for the thrill of unearthing ancient treasures, but as things began to spiral out of control, it became apparent that his investment in the project was far more personal. Dr. Abbas, who had tirelessly led the team to uncover hidden histories, suddenly found herself questioned by the one person who had been her most significant ally in securing funds for the dig. Yet it was the archaeologist Claire who seemed to be affected most by this unraveling. Once devoted to the mission, her focus now wavered, her face tightening with the strain of being caught in the middle of this power struggle. It was as though she were no longer working to uncover history, but merely to survive the internal storm. Meanwhile, the local workers began to retreat further into the shadows. Initially, they had been eager to help with the excavation, but as they labored near the tomb, they whispered among themselves about a curse that had plagued the tomb for centuries. Tales of vengeful spirits and tragic fates befell anyone who dared to disturb the royal family's final resting place. These were not just stories, they were warnings passed down from generation to generation. The workers, some of whom had come from neighboring villages, spoke with a quiet, unnerving fear. Yet when questioned, they quickly brushed aside their superstitions, attributing their concerns to ancient folklore, nothing more. The archaeologists, dismissing these fears, remained focused on their work. But even Poirot, who had always been a man of reason, couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The eerie noises at night, the strange shifts in temperature, and the unease that seemed to grip the camp, these were not simple coincidences. Something was deeply wrong. Despite the conflict and the growing whispers, the excavation continued. The breakthrough came late one evening when Poirot, unable to sleep, returned to the tomb to observe the dig's progress. The air was thick with dust and unease, but Poirot's sharp mind was singularly focused on one thing: an anomaly. Something had caught his eye in the deepest recesses of the tomb, a stone panel that had appeared to be part of the wall itself. His curiosity piqued. Poirot carefully examined it, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings that adorned its surface. At first it seemed like nothing more than another decorative element, until the stone shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay an object unlike anything Poirot or the team had encountered before. A sleek, black artifact, its surface covered with strange, unfamiliar symbols. The object felt almost alive in his hands, pulsing with an energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. It was smooth, otherworldly, definitely not something the team had unearthed before. He could sense that it was old, ancient, and imbued with a powerful force. Poirot could not shake the feeling that the artifact was tied to something far greater than the tomb or its royal occupants. What had Sarah uncovered before her disappearance? Could this object hold the key to the mystery? Cliffhanger. Poirot held the artifact carefully, his mind racing with questions. As he examined it, the atmosphere in the tomb seemed to shift almost imperceptibly at first, but the tension in the air grew thicker. Then, without warning, the temperature dropped. A cold, biting wind swept through the site. It was the kind of wind that cuts straight through you, sending a shiver down your spine. The wind swirled through the camp, stronger than any desert breeze. The lanterns around the tomb flickered violently before they were suddenly extinguished, plunging the entire excavation site into absolute darkness. The silence that followed was deafening and eerie, oppressive stillness that hung in the air, thick and unnatural. Poirot's breath caught in his throat as he strained his ears, trying to make sense of what was happening. His flashlight flickered, casting long dancing shadows on the walls of the tomb. And then it came, the scream. It was loud and piercing, the kind of scream that makes your blood run cold. It echoed through the camp, carrying a sense of terror and desperation. The scream cut through the still night, its intensity so raw that Poirot's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just the scream that unnerved Poirot, it was the words that followed. "It's happening again." The voice was frantic, filled with a sense of dread and panic. The words reverberated through the dark, and for a moment Poirot stood frozen, his mind racing. Who had screamed? Was it one of the team members? Had someone else been affected by the curse? The darkness around him felt oppressive, the desert winds carrying with them a sense of foreboding. Poirot's grip tightened around the artifact as he stood there, his mind desperately trying to piece together the fragments of the mystery. What had just happened? What was the significance of the artifact? And why had it triggered such an unsettling chain of events? With no answers, and the desert silence pressing in from all sides, Poirot knew one thing for certain. They had unearthed something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. Just as the lights flickered back to life, a shout rang out from the distance. A figure staggered into view, drenched in sweat, wide-eyed with terror. The camp rushed to meet them, but Poirot's attention remained fixed on the strange, unmarked artifact still clutched in his hands. What had he just triggered? And why did the air feel as though it were holding its breath, waiting for the next catastrophe? The curse unfolds. The atmosphere at the dig site had been tense before, but now it was unbearable. No one spoke of it openly, yet every glance exchanged, every hushed whisper, every hesitant step carried the weight of a growing, unshakable fear. The excavation was no longer about uncovering the past. It was about survival. Poirot watched them closely. He saw the way hands trembled when they thought no one was looking. He noticed how eyes darted toward the desert horizon, as if expecting something or someone to emerge from the swirling sands. The tragic death of Dr. Layla Abbas had shattered what little illusion of safety remained. Though there were no visible wounds, her face had been contorted in sheer terror, her mouth slightly open as though she had been gasping for breath in her final moments. What had she seen before she died? What had driven her to the edge of horror itself? The local workers were the first to break the silence. They spoke in hushed, urgent tones, their voices quivering with reverence and fear. "The curse has been awakened," one of them murmured, refusing to step any closer to the site. "The Queen's wrath has begun." Another nodded in solemn agreement, crossing himself in a mix of faith and superstition. Poirot dismissed their fears outwardly, but even he could not deny the eerie pattern that had begun to emerge. First, the missing archaeologist gone without a trace, her final recorded words tied to an artifact of unknown origin. Now, a second victim, her lifeless eyes staring into eternity. He did not believe in curses, but he did believe in murder, and someone was using the legend of the tomb to their advantage. The sandstorm had only worsened the situation. It had been sudden, violent, and relentless, a force of nature so fierce that even the most seasoned desert travelers had been caught off guard. Had it been merely coincidence, or had it been used as a cover? Had the storm provided the perfect opportunity for a killer to strike? Poirot began his careful interrogation of the team, using his signature blend of charm and precision. He observed more than he asked, allowing the guilty to reveal themselves through subtle gestures, fleeting expressions, and nervous habits. Professor Alistair Montrose was the most obvious subject of interest. His obsession with the excavation had long been whispered about in academic circles. He had spent years deciphering ancient scripts, piecing together lost histories, and had even been accused once, though never proven, of falsifying findings to make his discoveries seem more groundbreaking. Now, faced with the realization that the tomb held more secrets than he had anticipated, was it possible that he had killed to protect his legacy? Then there was Lady Evelyn Harrington, the wealthy patron funding the excavation. A widow of considerable fortune, she had a deep fascination with Mesopotamian history, yet Poirot detected something deeper, a personal attachment to the tomb that went beyond academic interest. Her demeanor remained composed, yet her eyes betrayed something else. Was it fear, guilt, or something more dangerous? Dr. Rajiv Malhotra, the expedition's chief researcher, had always been the quiet one, content to stay in the shadows of the more prominent figures in the team. But Poirot had learned long ago that the quiet ones often had the most to hide. He had been seen arguing with Dr. Abbas only days before her death. A minor dispute, or had it been something more? Hassan, the local guide, had worked on countless expeditions, yet he seemed more disturbed by the events than anyone else. He alone warned the team not to enter the hidden chamber. He alone spoke of the ancient symbols with genuine dread. But was it fear of the unknown or knowledge of something no one else had realized? As Poirot probed deeper, resentments surfaced. Old rivalries, professional jealousy, hidden relationships all began to unravel. "You don't understand," Montrose finally admitted, rubbing a shaking hand over his face. "This tomb isn't just a burial site, it's a warning." The queen buried here. She was betrayed, murdered by her own court. They feared she would rise again. So they sealed her away, leaving behind those symbols as a message. Poirot arched an eyebrow. A message or a curse? Montrose hesitated. Both. Poirot had his suspicions, but it wasn't until he examined the hidden chamber once more that the truth began to take shape. The strange artifact, the one that had been discovered shortly before the first disappearance, held inscriptions that didn't match the rest of the tomb. It was different in outlier. Poirot traced the markings, noting the deliberate way they had been scratched into the stone. This was not an ancient warning. This was something added later. Someone had placed it there. The weight of realization settled in. The deaths were not the result of an ancient curse. They were a carefully orchestrated deception that had now claimed multiple lives. But why? And how many more would die before the truth came to light? Just as Poirot turned to leave, the torches flickered violently, casting long, erratic shadows against the cavern walls. A sudden gust of wind rushed through the chamber, unnatural in its intensity. Then, a blood-curdling scream shattered the night. Cliffhanger. It's happening again. The camp erupted in chaos as figures rushed toward the source of the scream. Poirot moved swiftly, his heart pounding as he reached the edge of the dig site where a single lantern had been knocked over, its feeble flame barely illuminating the footprints leading away into the darkness. Someone was missing. Again. And this time the footprints didn't lead back toward the camp. They led straight into the vast emptiness of the desert, only to stop abruptly, as if the person had been swallowed by the sands themselves. The air inside the excavation shelter was thick with tension, the storm outside battering the walls, as if nature itself was conspiring against them. Lady Eleanor Graves sat stiffly, her face pale, her fingers gripping the edge of the table as if anchoring herself to reality. "My husband," she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He died here, on a site just like this, and no one ever found out how." The room fell silent. The flickering lanterns cast eerie shadows on the canvas walls, making the tension even more suffocating. Poirot, his keen eyes locked onto hers, leaned forward. "Tell me, madame, what exactly happened to him?" She swallowed hard, her gaze darting toward the others, as if fearing unseen eyes lurking in the dark. "He had been on the verge of a great discovery," she murmured. "A secret hidden for thousands of years. And then one night, he vanished. They found him days later. No wounds, no struggle, just a look of terror on his face." A collective shiver ran through the group. Someone cleared their throat nervously. "It's a coincidence," muttered one of the researchers. "Surely," but the words hung, unfinished, as Poirot withdrew a small, dust-covered notebook from his pocket. It had belonged to the missing archaeologist, Dr. Layla Abbas. "And yet," Poirot said, flipping through its pages, "Dr. Abbas also believed she had stumbled upon something that should have remained lost." He tapped a particular passage. The ink was smudged, hurriedly written, but still legible. "They warned me not to dig deeper, But I have to. The truth changes everything. Poirot's voice turned sharper. She knew something worth killing for. The storm outside howled even louder, rattling the metal beams of the shelter, making the lanterns sway. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Another muttered a prayer under their breath. The weight of the unknown pressed down on them all, suffocating and inescapable. Poirot slowly turned, taking in every face. The passionate archaeologist, eyes darting nervously. The wealthy donor, lips pursed in denial. The local guide, fingers twitching. The widow, stiff and silent. Every single one of them was hiding something. The truth, Poirot said finally, his voice quiet but firm, is buried in the past. But someone here is trying to bury it again. Cliffhanger. At that precise moment, slam! The door was thrown shut with a force so violent that the lanterns flickered, plunging the room into near darkness. A collective gasp. A chair scraped against the floor. Someone let out a sharp, panicked breath. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing against the wooden floor. But the sound wasn't coming from inside the group. It was coming from somewhere else. Somewhere it shouldn't be. Then, from the far corner of the shelter, in the pitch-black void, a whisper. So faint, so chilling, it barely rose above the storm outside. You should not have come here. And then a scream. The final confrontation. The storm had finally cleared, leaving a chilling silence in its wake, the kind that only follows a great upheaval. Inside the camp, the air was thick with tension. The violent winds and heavy rains had scattered the team across their makeshift shelter, but as the storm subsided, they returned to the dimly lit room where the investigation had led them. Even the desert outside, normally a place of solitude and mystery, felt alive with the weight of what had occurred. Poirot, ever the observer, stood in the center of the room, his sharp eyes scanning each face, each set of eyes. The group was on edge, restless, fearful of the unknown truth, but each one of them hiding something beneath their surface. The game had shifted, and now Poirot had the upper hand. His every move, every word, carried the gravity of someone who had unraveled the mystery that had been so carefully woven around them. The murderers, the secrets, the tomball of it was finally coming to light. Poirot's voice broke the silence, cool and controlled, but with an edge that made the room grow colder. He had been silent for too long, allowing everyone to wonder who among them was capable of murder. Now he was ready to reveal the twisted truth. The murderer, the mastermind behind these tragic deaths, was standing right before them, playing his part in a game much darker than anyone had imagined. With deliberate precision, Poirot began, his words cutting through the tension like a knife. He started with the head archaeologist, a man whom everyone had trusted, a man who had come across as knowledgeable and dedicated to the dig. The head archaeologist had not only lied about his intentions, but had manipulated the entire excavation for his own personal gain. Poirot explained that this man had a singular, obsessive desire to unlock the royal family's lost secrets, but there was more to his story. This wasn't just about academic prestige, it was about control. He wanted to rewrite history itself. Poirot's words hung in the air, heavy with revelation. The archaeologist, in his quest for power and revenge, had uncovered the hidden royal tomb. He had found the long-buried secrets of a royal family who had once ruled over the land, a family whose downfall had created a ripple effect that spanned generations. But this wasn't a history the archaeologist sought to preserve. It was a history he intended to control, to manipulate for his own selfish reasons. He had uncovered an artifact that would give him power beyond measure, something that could change the course of history, and he intended to keep it to himself. Poirot continued, recounting the series of events that had led to the deaths of several of the team members. The first victim, the archaeologist's own colleague, had become a liability. He had begun to question the head archaeologist's motives and had grown suspicious of his behavior. To keep his secrets intact, the head archaeologist had taken matters into his own hands, eliminating anyone who posed a threat. The same fate had befallen the missing archaeologist, the one whose disappearance had seemed like a tragic accident. But Poirot had discovered the truth. She too had come too close to the artifact's power and had uncovered secrets that the head archaeologist couldn't afford to be exposed. The widow, the grieving woman who had been left to mourn her husband's death, now stood before Poirot in shock. Her husband's death, she had thought, was the result of an unfortunate accident in the desert. But now, with Poirot's revelations, she saw the truth. Her husband had been another pawn in the archaeologist's cruel game. His knowledge, his proximity to the artifact, had made him another casualty in the pursuit of a secret that could reshape the world. The room was silent, but Poirot's words carried the weight of everything that had been hidden. The motive behind the murder was no longer a mystery. It was greed, revenge, and the obsessive need to control the past to dominate the future. The archaeologist, with his twisted sense of entitlement, had played everyone. He had used his colleagues, his team, as mere tools in his quest for power. And now, with the truth laid bare, the question lingered. How far would one man go to control the past? Poirot's piercing gaze moved from one person to another. The guilty party could no longer hide behind their facade. But the truth wasn't just about one man's greed, it was about the manipulation of history itself. The artifact, once thought to be a mere trinket of the past, was far more valuable than anyone had realized. It was the key to a long-forgotten truth, a secret hidden for centuries. The head archaeologist had been willing to kill to control that power, to rewrite history in a way that would elevate him to a position of unparalleled authority. Poirot had uncovered the conspiracy, but as the pieces fell into place, the storm outside seemed to echo the chaos within. The wind howled, rattling the windows, but inside the room, the group was frozen. There was no turning back. The truth had been revealed, and with it, the consequences of their actions had been set in motion. The storm may have passed, but its aftermath lingered, and Poirot knew that the final act of this tragedy was yet to unfold. The last few moments of the confrontation would be the most explosive. As Poirot began to wrap up the case, something unusual caught his attention. A small, weathered tablet, seemingly lost in the chaos of the storm, now sat on the table before him. Its appearance was inexplicable. It had not been there moments ago. Poirot's gaze narrowed as he picked it up. The ancient inscription on the tablet was familiar, yet it held a new meaning in the context of the murder that had unfolded. He read the inscription aloud, his voice steady yet filled with an ominous weight. Not all secrets are meant to be revealed. The words sent a chill through the room, and just as they echoed through the air, something unimaginable happened. The door, which had been securely shut, slammed open with a deafening crash, and in the darkness beyond, a soft, eerie whisper reached their ears. "You've found the truth," the voice murmured. "But at what cost?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Poirot, unflinching, stood still, holding the tablet in his hand, his mind racing. The door had opened, but no one had entered. The voice had come from nowhere. His mind flashed to the possible consequences of their discoveries. The past, it seemed, was not just a history to be uncovered, it was a force that could change everything. And now, with the truth laid bare, the group stood on the precipice of something far darker than they could have ever imagined. The question lingered in the air, hanging like a shadow over them all. What had they truly uncovered, and at what cost? As Poirot stood at the center of the storm-ravaged excavation site, his eyes flicked from one team member to the next. The tension was thick in the air, palpable. Each breath seemed more fragile than the last. The storm outside had torn through the camp with relentless fury, but within, the only tempest was the storm of secrets and lies that had been simmering beneath the surface. Now, with the last pieces of the puzzle falling into place, Poirot's sharp mind finally understood the depth of the betrayal that had been carried out within their very midst. The stolen artifact was not just a relic, it was the key to an entire hidden history, one that the murderer had been willing to kill to keep secret at all costs. The more he uncovered, the more he realized that the truth was far darker and more complicated than anyone had imagined. As Poirot reached the final chapter of this grim tale, something struck him, a detail that had eluded him until now. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the room, catching the subtle movements of one particular team member. He had been playing both sides all along, fomenting division, subtly manipulating events and planting seeds of doubt in the minds of others. It was this individual who had been orchestrating much of the chaos in their midst, whose motives were steeped in personal gain, revenge, and the desire to manipulate history to fit their own vision. As Poirot pieced the puzzle together, the revelation hit with the force of a lightning strike. The murderer was not just someone trying to bury a secret. No, this person had been trying to take control of the narrative itself, to control the history that the tomb held, and by doing so, to unlock untold wealth and power. Just as Poirot began to draw the final conclusions, a shift in the atmosphere sent a chill through the room. Something was different. The storm outside had cleared, the howling winds now replaced with an eerie silence, but within the shelter the air felt thick with something unknown. Poirot's gaze shifted across the table, his sharp eyes catching something out of place. A tablet, one he had not noticed before, lay there. It had not been there moments ago. Lost in the storm, forgotten in the chaos yet now. It was resting quietly on the table, almost waiting for him. The cold stone surface seemed to hum with an ancient energy, and the faint inscription on its surface beckoned to him. He could not ignore it. As Poirot reached for it, his fingers brushing against the smooth edges, he could sense the weight of history bearing down on him. This tablet, this forgotten piece of the past, held the final key. The inscription was simple, but the words carried the weight of centuries. Not all secrets are meant to be revealed. The very moment the words left his lips, the atmosphere shifted again. There was a faint creaking sound from the far side of the room, followed by a sudden gust of cold air that whipped through the shelter, extinguishing the candles and plunging the room into complete darkness. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of breathing, rapid, shallow, nervous breaths. And then, a whisper, soft at first, but growing louder, more distinct. "You found the truth. But at what cost?" The voice was familiar, yet unidentifiable, and it reverberated through the room like an echo from the past, a warning carried on the wind. A cold shiver ran down Poirot's spine as the last words faded into the silence. His heart raced, but he knew this was no ordinary threat. This was a challenge. The truth had been found, but the cost of uncovering it was yet to be revealed. What had they unleashed by digging too deep into the past? And who was this mysterious figure, their identity hidden in the shadows, waiting for the truth to be exposed? The storm had subsided, but another storm of secrets and consequences was just beginning. Cliffhanger. The screen fades to black as Poirot's voice echoes in the void. The truth has been uncovered, but the question remains, who will pay the price for it? What do you think? Who do you believe will pay the ultimate price for uncovering the secrets of the tomb? Leave your theories in the comments below. As Poirot made his way toward the edge of the camp, the rising sun cast long, foreboding shadows across the desert. The weight of the case, the lives lost, the secrets uncovered, all seemed to press down upon him. The storm had passed, but the tension that lingered in the air felt like a new, invisible storm that was yet to fully break. Poirot reflected on the events that had transpired, the twists and revelations that had unfolded with such disturbing clarity. His mind, sharp as ever, mulled over the case, but there was one thought that refused to leave him. Sometimes, the dead hold more power than the living. It was an unsettling realization, yet undeniably true. The buried secrets of the past, the choices made long ago, had set into motion a chain of events that no one could escape. They had all sought answers, but the truth, in its purest form, was far more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. As Poirot disappeared into the distance, the camera lingered on the now quiet camp. But just as it seemed that the final chapter had been written, a new piece of the puzzle emerged. In the dim light of the deserted tent, a solitary artifact lay untouched, resting in the corner, hidden from view. No one had seen it before, and yet it seemed to whisper of yet another secret left behind, an enigma that still beckoned. The camera zoomed in on it, the intricate carvings on its surface glowing faintly in the dim light, a chilling reminder that some things are not meant to be uncovered. The screen faded to black, the silence hanging thick in the air. But then, faint but unmistakable, a voice unnervingly calm and deliberate echoed through the void. "This is not the end." The words sent a shiver down the spine, leaving the audience suspended in the dark, questioning everything they had just witnessed. The artifact was not just a relic, it was a message. A message that the past had not finished speaking, that the story was far from over. The final reveal was not the conclusion, but rather a new beginning, one that would leave viewers yearning for answers, desperate to uncover the truth buried beneath the layers of history. As the screen remained dark, the question lingered in the silence, unanswered. What secrets still lie hidden, waiting to be uncovered?